So welcome to this webinar on measuring the social impact of your CSA. Here to present it are Clare Horrell from the Real Farming Trust and Luke Owen from the Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience at Coventry Uni, who are co-developers of the Toolkit. I'm not going to say anything else. I'm going to leave you to be given lots of knowledge about social impact by them, and then there'll be a space for questions at the end. So thanks, Luke and Claire.
Great stuff. Okay, can you all hear me okay? Just thumbs up, yeah, good stuff. So how many we've got in the room? We've got about 5 of us in the room. Yeah, that's cool. I mean, we might get 1 or 2 more drip feed in, which is fine, but we'll get started now anyway. Give us a second, guys. I'm just going to start the slide share. Okay, so you should be able to see the slides.
Yeah, we can, Luke. Yeah.
Good. I have to check because yeah, my dual screens are just yeah, a bit all over the shop. Morning, everyone. Yeah, good to see you. It's good to sort of plug into this this sort of CSA space, this CSA focused work on the toolkit, and I'm looking forward to talking a bit about what we've been doing, but then I also want to have a bit of a discussion about things as well, and you know, I don't want this just to be me talking and Claire talking about it all the time. I think it's important that we have a bit of a dialogue going on to maximize the time we've got a couple of hours. If you need to leave, that's no problem. Just a bit of like housekeeping, I guess. If you can stick yourself on mute if you're not talking, that's usually a good help. And what else? Yeah, we're being recorded. I'm not sure what's going to happen to the recording afterwards, whether that's going to be public, but it will be public, yeah? It will,
yeah, we'll put it on our website, so you'll be able to rewatch it and other people will be able to see it too.
Yeah. Okay, so no swearing then. Okay, I'm going to get started. So yeah, thanks for joining, guys. The first one to start is using the cat scale. So how are you today? How are you feeling? Which cat are you? There's 9 cats to choose from. So either in the chat box, or if you wanted to say, you know, take yourself off mute and mention which cat you are, by all means do. But just a bit of fun really to get going, because it's still relatively early in the morning. Yeah, so it's which cat are you today? I am probably, I've done this before, I've used this scale before, and today I'm I don't know really, maybe 3, yeah, 3. Yeah, Susie and me are on the same page then, we're 3. What about the rest of you? What numbers are you today? I was feeling a bit 8 earlier, if I'm honest, and then it started to rain on the school run, so I was definitely feeling 8, but yeah, 3, I guess 3 for me is kind of, yeah, probably about right. It's feeling perhaps a little bit like, oh, there's a lot to get through, there's a lot of material, but we'll get there, we'll be all right. Okay, so that's the cat scale done. That's the end of the seminar. Any questions? No, I'm only checking. Okay, so here's the structure for the day. Also, just use the raise your hand function. You know, you can raise your hand on Zoom if you want me to stop in my tracks and explain anything, or if you can't quite hear me, just do that and interject. Here's what we're going to cover today. Yeah, I mean, it looks quite a lot. There is a lot to get through, but as I say, a lot of it is kind of dialogue based. So we'll start by me telling you and talking to you about what we're doing, and then we'll sort of think a bit more about how the toolkit can apply to your world. So this kind of bit here might be where we get to some really interesting discussions. And given the numbers, actually, we might not need it to do a breakout space later, because there's only sort of 5 or 6 of us, which I think is quite a nice manageable number for a breakout room anyway. So we might naturally just be in a breakout room already, which will be handy because it will stay recording as well. So yeah, the question there is, what does social impact mean to you or to your organisation? I know I've put that we asked that, and I don't think we did ask that in advance. We should have done, so I apologise I didn't send an email, but I want you to think about that now for a moment, and just think about what it means to your organisation. And maybe it'd be useful, given the numbers in the room are quite small, it'd be useful just to have a quick hello and who you are, and also what organisation you're representing or coming from, because I think that would help us and the others in the room to just get a sense of a temperature check of who's here. So yeah, what does social impact mean to my organisation? And then just a very brief introduction about yourself. So over to you for a second there. I don't know if who wants to kickstart that response.
Okay. Yep.
Yep. Sorry, who have we got? Sorry.
I'm muted, have I?
No, Heather, yeah.
Yep. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're good,
Yeah.
Heather, yeah.
So both Lou and I actually are growing local from Hereford. We've not yet started our community garden. Well, we've not got it going. We're in the long and complicated process of acquiring land, which is coming from the council, so a community asset transfer.
Yeah.
And planning, etc. But the whole idea of what we're doing is to be close walking distance from Hereford and from a large area of housing which is fairly deprived. So we are very keen. This is our motivating factor alongside growing food, is to engage and empower the local community.
Nice.
So we are really interested in how we are going to measure that for ourselves, but in the long run for grant applications, and also to make sure that we're doing what we set out to do.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Heather. That's really useful. That's a great succinct snapshot. That really helps.
Yeah. Can I just speak? I'm also from Growing Local, and I'm Lou.
Hi, Lou.
Meet you all. I should just say as well is we actually have had, our organisation has run for 12 years. Although this new community sort of market garden project is a huge new project, although we have been working with local schools and running a veg bag scheme for 12 years actually. And every year I apply for numerous grants and to cover our educational programme, and social impact does come into it, and it's really useful to know for me, toolkits to be able to measure what we're achieving out in the local community. It's great, we do lots of brilliant evaluations immediately after all our projects, but to actually measure our value of what we do and what we're going to achieve in the future is hugely important.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to step up really in what we currently do.
Yeah, that's good. Great, thanks, Lou. Good. Yeah, thank you. Who else wants to follow up on that?
I can say for us, so we're a new project as well that hasn't. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Right. That hasn't quite started yet, but almost. And right from the beginning, we've been very committed to the social impact aspect of what we're going to do, and in particular, this commitment to the fact that we're right between some of the wealthiest areas of Edinburgh and some of the least wealthy areas of Edinburgh. So we want to know, basically we want to know how we make a difference in terms of people's relationship to food, in particular, I think, in some of those areas. So in terms of our people, do we have any impact in terms of changing what people eat, or people's understanding of where the food comes from, or, you know, or anything really?
Yeah.
As well as hopefully getting more people engaging with the outdoors or growing food. So I think that.
Thank you. Yeah, that's
and some of the stuff that's difficult to measure, like the other thing that we would ideally like to be that we see ourselves maybe being able to be, is creating community cohesion between these very disparate communities, and community cohesion not just between the wealthy and the not wealthy, but maybe the minority groups in the area, and that's hard to look at. So
yeah, for sure. Okay,
hard to measure.
That's yeah, for sure. Thank you. That's sorry. What's your name? Sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Lisa.
Lisa. Thanks, Lisa. I can see it. In your little name box by your name.
It's very long. Yeah.
No, it says Lauriston Farm, and Lauriston Farm, from memory, I think there's a Lauriston Farm down in.
Yeah, there is.
Essex. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not in Essex.
Yeah. Are you connected to them?
No.
Oh, okay.
Our farm is in front of a place called Lauriston Castle.
Okay.
So hence the name of the farm is Lauriston Farm. We are recognizing that we may need to tweak it a bit because of that.
No, that's
the
okay.
fact that there's already one.
We're also, just follow up very briefly, we're also working on another project called Ready Healthy Eat, which is one of our partners is Cyrenians, and they're in Edinburgh, and we're working on similar kind of issues about access, healthy food for people that need it, essentially. I'll park that for another day, but that's a nice crossover there. Great, thanks, Lisa. Okay, who else have we got in the room? We've got Lydia. And,
hi.
Yeah, hi.
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm a
Dave.
colleague of Lisa's, also in Edinburgh, working on Lauriston. Just to add a little bit there from conversations I've had in different places on different farms, like the social indicators have also been really useful in explaining the sort of cost of food when you're involved in direct marketing. So instead of people like expecting to see prices that might compare to supermarkets or whatever, in part of the conversation, particularly when we're looking at the sort of wealthier neighbourhoods around our farm, looking to bring like a big breadth of social indicators of the benefits of the work we're doing on the farm into the conversation about cost as well. So just like being able to succinctly identify like a range of indicators that then you can kind of like, pull out in different conversations to sort of expand the conversation from this just being food that you're purchasing to like kind of all of the rest of what's happening around that growing, and like how we're trying to engage community on different levels as well as producing food. So I think just like more resources and tools to be able to have that conversation and communicate sort of like quite a diverse bunch of things that we're trying to do as well as produce food.
Yeah, and also like how the social and environmental impacts like overlap. Like, you sort of get folk who are very focused on the carbon capture or the biodiversity impact of having an agroecology organic farm, but it's not, you don't often get the sort of whole package of, it's not just about one or the other, it's about the crossover and the how everything's interlinked and how do you express that well.
For sure. I think that's a really good point, and thanks as well, Dave, for your addition there as well. It's one of the things we need to consider more is how we do integrate with other indicators, other tools that help us to articulate, not just the social impacts, but also like the resilience of it, which is a bit more kind of holistic, and that's a challenge. It's a tricky square to circle. But yeah, I think the point you made as well, Dave, around, I think you were getting at some ideas around like the true cost of food and like the impact that food has beyond the calorific intake of it, because it's inherently imbued with almost like ripple effect type things, what you put in your body has an impact on your body, but also the people around you, the people removed from you, etc. So I think that the point you're making is very valid, and that's one of the key things which as a movement we need to try and stress is this true cost of food. And I always find it difficult when I talk to my friends, family about what I do, and almost explain that some food is too cheap. Food is you externalize the cost of it, and food's too cheap. We've got food banks and all that, so it's like you've got this real sort of dichotomy going on. It's hard to explain to people this idea of true cost accounting almost. So yeah, these are issues which I think our toolkit helps us to try and engage with. Okay, I'm just in the room as well. I think is it Lydia who's not had a chance to speak? Are you there, Lydia?
Luke, she's just put in the chat that she doesn't have a microphone or a camera, so won't be able to input in there. I don't know, Lydia, whether you can write anything in the chat, whether it's too much to write.
Yeah, if you want,
but if you do want to say something, just shove it in the chat.
Use
And
the chat function. Use the chat function if you can't engage by talking, then we'll review that as well. So that's fine. Okay, that's really helpful, guys. That helps us to get a sense of where we're at and the kind of people that are in the room and what you're doing and are interested in. So that was really, really helpful. The question as well, just what does social impact mean to my organisation? I think what we're getting at here is this idea of it's trying to access perhaps people that are perhaps deprived or haven't traditionally been able to access sort of good, healthy, nutritious food. Trying to think about the true cost of food and the impact that food has beyond just the eating of it. Community cohesion was mentioned, and I think that these are right on point to some of the things which our toolkit helps you to engage with. And what our toolkit won't do is it won't like give you a magic answer and say, yep, you're doing social impact, off you go. It will kind of, it's a process that helps you to think about and articulate these kind of issues. So let's move on. Yeah, so here's some objectives for the session. I'm not going to read them verbatim. I'll share the slides at the end of this as well, so you can review them and share them with peers and colleagues. And obviously there'll be a recording as well. See, Holly's entered the waiting room. I'm just going to admit Holly. Yeah, and I think that just want to draw your attention to probably maybe the 5th and the 6th point of the objectives, which is I want you to feel like you've got a sense of how you might apply some of this to your.
And I know my lawyer's still alive.
Hello, Holly.
Speak to someone else. I said, "Have you seen it?" Yes.
Holly, hello.
They've only seen it on Zoom.
Well, I feel like we've entered a podcast. Yeah, Holly, are you there? Okay.
I've just muted her,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, well done, well done. Yeah, so yeah, it was like another Jackie Wheeler situation there. Is it Jackie Wheeler? Anyway, number 5 and 6. How does it apply to your world and your work? I think is one thing that I'd like you to come away from this session feeling that you can see the application potential, and also feeling enthused about it. I want you to sort of do you feel like, okay, I can see how this applies. I'm keen to do a bit more with this, and if that's the answer to that is yes, then I think that this couple of hours we've got today is time well spent. My screen's just crashed again. This happened when I tried to do it last time. Just give us a second, guys. In fact, Claire, would you be able to share your screen, Claire? I don't know if that might help actually. Have you got the slides to hand?
Yeah, hold on, I'll just get them up. Hold on.
I think there might be an issue with my bandwidth or something. Sorry, guys. Just whilst we're doing that, Holly, you've just entered the waiting room. Welcome to the session. We are being recorded, by the way, as well. Are you able to? We just had a quick sort of introduction with the guys. I don't know if you wanted to just give us a very brief introduction of maybe the organisation you're representing or coming from, and also what your take on social impact is. I don't know if that's something you can relay to us. No. Okay, well, if you heard that, Holly, then you use the chat function. I'll just type that into the chat box. Okay, yeah, if you're able to, yeah, can you just share? Can you make that full?
Can you see it my screen or not?
Yeah, I can see.
You
your
can.
screen.
Okay.
Can you make it full screen just by pressing the little?
Yeah. I will do that. Yeah, hold on.
Sorry, guys.
Is that better? Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good. Yeah, if we just skip through to where we were, good. Yeah, so that's basically it. So if we move on to the next slide, please. That's is it what's the professor who does that? Next slide, please. I forget his name.
Chris Whitty.
Chris Whitty, that's the one. Yeah, feel like Chris Whitty now. Next slide, please. Okay, so why do we need a toolkit? So, I mean, before we talk about why we need a toolkit, it's worth just mentioning that I think that we'd all agree that we're in a state of crises, in the sense of climate crises. You know, we're in a state of unsustainability, and things need to change and transform, and we need to make sustainability transitions. That's one reason why we need to keep collecting evidence and make the case about why we need things like CSAs to become far more part of the foodscape, essentially, you know, and move from the periphery perhaps to far more, you know, normalized ways of doing food. So that's one point, is it's about sustainability transitions and sort of transitions to more resilient futures. And the climate crisis is definitely picking up pace, in the sense of people are engaging with it more. It's giving a lot more traction than it did in years previous, but it still requires evidence, and social impacts for what you guys are doing is part of that puzzle. It's helping to make the case that what these types of initiatives, CSAs, are actually really worthwhile. They deliver on a whole host of benefits. That's an important part of the puzzle for sort of transition to sustainability. But yeah, the first point on this slide is about instigating a sort of an organizational and monitoring culture, and that's another thing that perhaps sort of community food led initiatives have been less you know, less prolific at, in terms of like this culture of monitoring and documenting what impact is happening. So it's about developing this culture, and a toolkit helps you to do that. Secondly, yeah, I think Heather mentioned it literally verbatim, that point about trying to understand, are we achieving what we set out to achieve? And a toolkit will help you to think about that. You know, are we doing what we said we would? And if not, how do we intervene? Thirdly, it's a mechanism for sort of reflection, for learning, for thinking about yeah, what's where you're going. So it's again, it's a tool. The toolkit itself will help you to engage as an organization about that. Fourthly, as I was mentioning a moment ago about this idea of evidence, yes, you might need evidence for a range of reasons. You might want it to sort of fulfill the needs of a funding bid, or to satisfy the needs of a funder who has funded you. But you might also want to collate evidence as part of a wider network who are doing the same thing for policy or advocacy work. It might be that you want to try and boost your marketing or your sort of your engagement with the media or whoever. So evidence can be used in multiple ways, and the toolkit again helps you to think about that. And then fifthly, it's a way that, you know, we can collaborate. It's a pivot where different people and different types of expertise can sort of come together and engage and talk about these issues which we're talking about today. So the toolkit itself, the social impact toolkit, which if you log on to that website, I put the link into the chat box. I'll just do that once again. It's designed to be quite sort of audio-visual and quite sort of user-friendly. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to have a look at it, but yeah, the idea is that we're trying to make it sort of standalone in a way that you can work almost independently with it, but also with the support of sort of researchers as well. So yeah, it's kind of like a sort of an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary kind of approach with that. Yeah, next slide, please, Claire. Yeah, and so here we have the sort of the screen grab from the toolkit, and I'd encourage you to log on to that website I just put into the chat box so you can actually have a look at it. And it is designed to be kind of interactive, and there's a very brief introductory video which I won't play now, but it does sort of explain a bit more about the genealogy of it. But what we've got here is this kind of this dartboard or a circle or a ripple effect going on. We haven't quite figured out how best to articulate what that is, but it's kind of like the toolkit on a page. Is this the first time that you guys have seen that? Some nods, some yeses. Okay, so yeah.
I've seen it before.
Yeah. So I'm going to explain kind of how this is bolted together and what it means in a very sort of broad brush way. But as I say, if you go onto the website whilst I'm talking as well, you'll see how it works and how it operates. So where we start with then really is if we can start either way. You can either start from the outside in So you can start by thinking about, I want to use a tool to figure something out. That might be a starting position. Or you might start from the center and say, right, I want to engage with social impact. How do I do that? And so there's two ways that you can come in. So if we go from the middle first, social impact, if you click on that sort of that module, the social impact module, you can click on that and it will take you into a portal or a screen which has got some materials about social impact and a sort of an introductory video. And each of these modules on this diagram have got some explanatory text and a video which explains what it is and how you might engage with it. So it's designed to be quite sort of straightforward and very sort of quite descriptive, really. So if we start with social impact, the way that we've gone about this is we've developed it with the over the course of the last sort of 5 years or so, really, with a number of community food businesses, and I'll explain what we mean by that term. But it's people who have helped us develop it. There has been some CSAs that have helped us develop this toolkit, so it does apply to your world. And we started out by thinking about, well, what does social impact mean? And we kind of had various workshops pre-pandemic about this in real life. It was amazing. And we started with social impact, and then we broke that down into these 3 domains. And these 3 domains are the lighter blue circle, and they are health, community and livelihoods. So if you want to talk about social impact in the context of community food systems like CSAs, these are the broad domains that you can start to unpack what social impact is, right? So within a domain, and there's an explanation about what we mean by that within the toolkit, within a domain there's various outcomes that will happen, and these outcomes, so think about health outcomes or community outcomes, these are the types of things that are going to materialize as a result of what you do, irrespective of whether you want them to happen or not. These are the outcomes of if you're producing food for communities, these are the kind of outcomes that will happen, basically. And so what we're starting to do now is to think about, okay, we've got social impact in the middle there, we've got some outcomes that are happening, so we're starting to sort of find a way in to sort of talk about and think about social impact here. That's the next blue circle. And then in order to think about how we measure or assess or engage with these still broadly abstract concepts or abstract outcomes like inclusion, how do you actually measure inclusion? It's quite tricky. What you need is the green circle, and the green circle is the indicators. And these are designed to be measurable proxies which help you to evidence an outcome, which help you to evidence a domain, which help you to evidence social impact. You see the track, you see the journey, yeah? And that's what the indicators are. And each of those indicators, again, if you click on them, if you hover over them on your computer, that's the other thing to say, this only works on computers, it doesn't work on a smartphone yet because of the way it's been built, which is a problem, but it works on the computer. You can figure out what the indicator is about. So it will tell you what each indicator is asking you to think about or to measure or to capture. And that's a way for you to start evidencing those outcomes. The outer ring, you'll see there's a series of tools, and a lot of them are repeated. They're not all different. Some of them are repeated. And those tools, which are largely going to be things like surveys or sort of questionnaires, or maybe sort of workshops or focus groups with customers or staff or volunteers. Those tools contain a series of questions that you can use to measure the indicator. Yeah. And so you can see how you can come into it from 2 different ways there. So let's say that you start with, I want to hold a focus group with my customers. That's what your starting point is, because there's an open day next week and I really want to just talk to them for 10 minutes. So you would start with a focus group, then you might say, well, actually, I want to find out, is the food that we're providing, are they changing their diet as a result of that? Are people starting to think a bit more about where food comes from? Are they starting to eat more fresh produce? And so you would then see that there's a tool which has questions which help you to evidence that. And then you start to build up an argument that, well, this is as part of the social impact. Do you see where I'm going with it? Is that making sense? Yeah? Does anybody, I'm just going to pause for a second. Do you have any comments or questions about that, where we are at the moment? Anything not very clear there? Okay, if we go on to the next slide then, please, Claire. these are just some of the screen grabs from the online tool, basically. So you'll see that, and this on the green one here, we've got the background of the page is that it relates to the part of the circle that it is. So the green one is indicator. So sharing food and resources, that's an indicator. You'll see on that page there'll be a series of bullet points which will explain or describe to you what kind of things you need to capture in order to measure that indicator. Yeah, and there's also a video preceding that which explains it as well in a kind of audio way, because it's just a bit more easy to grasp and a bit more engaging. At the bottom as well, there's also like a quote of somebody who's, in this case, this is a member of a customer or a member who's explained that I've learned more about the hungry gap. That's really important part of understanding the year, the seasons in our country. So that was from a member who took part in a focus group a couple of years ago. You could argue that that is evidence that somebody's learning about seasonality, learning about the rhythm of food, which has been completely removed via supermarkets, arguably. And so you're starting to arguably there build a picture that this is having an impact on that person. Do you see where I'm going with that? Yeah, it's not life changing, it's not world changing, it's not going to like get DEFRA to change their policy overnight, but it's building a base, building a bit of evidence about what difference you're making. And that kind of evidence might be really important for you to apply for a grant funding application, because somebody wants the funding might be about seasonality or something. Yeah. And each page on this toolkit is kind of structured in this way, with a video, explanatory material. There's sort of a visual or a diagram to help you orientate where you are, and the color as well. Yeah, so green is indicator, the yellow is kind of the tool, etc., etc. So that's kind of how it works. Yeah, so I've seen the chat box. Holly's put a huge amount of work. Well done, thank you. It has been a lot of work, and it's especially during the pandemic as well, when we were kind of like trying to get this out there. And yeah, I won't bore you with that, but it's a process. It's not, I don't think it's ever going to be finished. I always think of it as like, you know, an artist who's doing a painting. It must be very hard to know when you finished it, and I feel a bit like that with this, that it's like a living space, and it will be added to and edited and changed. And I think as we apply it and work through it, it will evolve. Okay, yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, please, Claire. Okay, so I just wanted to just spend a very brief moment just saying who this is for. So I've explained a bit about how the toolkit works, what it kind of does and what it doesn't do, but this is really who it's for. And we're using the language of community food business. But you might also use words like community-led food project or community food initiative. This is really who the toolkit's for. So it's not being designed really in its guise at the moment for someone like Tesco to take it and run with it. Now they could run with it, and we could push them to do it and to try and play with it. But really what it's for is to help build capacity for you guys in the kind of the first instance. I think moving forward, I'd like to see this integrate with tools that would be more applicable to other sectors and to other types of food producing enterprises. But for now, this is starting sort of at the beginning. It's for community food businesses like CSAs, like box schemes, like you know, small scale food hubs, this kind of operation. And there's these sort of 6 different criteria that we argue constitutes a community food business where this toolkit is going to apply. So just to sort of run through them very briefly, we've got locally embedded self-organized innovations, which is a fancy way of saying that, you know, you've got a community-led thing that's happened, and it's sort of it's local, you know, it's based in a place. It's trading for the benefit of the local community, so it might be like a CIC or a community benefit society. It's accountable to local community. You know, that's quite important, this idea of transparency. It might be, you know, you might have a community food business like a CSA that's sort of led by a steering committee that's made up of members who have a say in how things go. So it's kind of more transparent than perhaps other ways of doing things. Focused on delivering impacts of some nature. And I think from your introductions earlier, you all sort of alluded to, you're not just producing calories. You know what I mean? You're trying to do more than that. And that's, again, part of this community food business criteria. Alignment with agroecological principles and practices. This is, again, thinking about CSAs and the fundamental nature of what a CSA is and how it works. This is very much aligned to sort of principles and practices of agroecology. Not necessarily everything or all of it, but parts of it. There'll be some resonance there. And then the final point, kind of similar to that, is around the types of supply chains that community food businesses operate with. And that's thinking about short supply chains, direct supply chains, which serve to reconnect or connect producers and consumers together. And, you know, the CSA model is about trying to build that sense of mutual shared risk and understanding and reciprocity, which is inherent within short food and values-based supply chains. So this idea of maybe a community of practice or solidarity economy. You know, I myself, I'm a member of a CSA not far from here, and that's, yeah, I do feel like I'm part of something, part of a community in that respect. You know, not necessarily totally embedded in it, but I'm part of that equation. I'm part of that community of practice. Does that kind of resonate with you? That what I'm articulating there? Yeah, it's probably used too many fancy words to explain what it means really, but I think it's just important to just caveat that our toolkit is designed for and has been designed by the types of organizations that are on this page. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Claire, if you wanted to go to the next slide, please, Claire. Yeah, and again, another kind of diagram that's just helping you to think about the who. It's not really, this toolkit isn't designed for one type of community food business. It could be that there's a very established, experienced CSA that's been going for a long time that would benefit from using this, even if they've been doing impact stuff for a long time, or they, you know, that they kind of have been tracking and monitoring their social impact for a number of years. There's still benefit to be had from people who have, on this right hand side of the slide, the veterans or the experienced guys. You know, there's still utility there, but I think that where there's perhaps the biggest gain is for those that are maybe new to the scene or newer entrants, or those that are perhaps starting out on thinking about impact in a more rigorous, systematic way. So on the left hand side of this spectrum, yeah, so it's not designed for anyone in particular, but I think that if you're perhaps towards the left hand side of this spectrum, you will find this will have a bigger impact on your impact monitoring culture, potentially. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say with that. But it has got a value across that whole spectrum. Okay, yeah, do you want to go to the next slide, please, Claire? Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to put in the chat box a link to a poll. So you should be able to, that should take you to a very, very brief poll. So if you just click on that, I think there's 3 or 4 questions in that poll. Yeah, 4, well, 5, but 4 questions really we want you to answer. If you can just click on that and just spend a moment doing that. Basically, what we want to just gauge here is, yeah, a better sense of, now you know about the toolkit and you know a little bit more about how it works and its rationale and who it's for. We want you to think about, are you delivering social impact? And there's kind of a scale there, whether you would agree or disagree with that. And then also the outcome areas. So those 8 outcome areas, which are the sort of the dark blue ring, the third ring out from the middle. The second question in that poll asks you, are you delivering social impact in the following? And it's these different outcome areas. And yeah, if you can have a go with it and just see, I mean, some of them are quite self-explanatory. And again, if you've got the website open as well, you might be able to orientate yourselves around it as well, which might help. And then the next question we ask is about where you'd like to deliver impact that perhaps you're not delivering impact in as well. And then the final question is the extent to which you're measuring or have measured impact. So if you just spend a moment doing that. Anybody not able to access those polls? Yeah, okay. Just spend a moment doing that. And now's also a good moment if anybody wants to raise a question or clarify anything, or Claire, maybe if you've got anything you want to add that I might have missed.
No, I don't think I've got anything to add. Luke, are you able to share your screen when the polls are in?
Yeah,
that'd be great, because I'm not logged in, so I'd need to come out of this, log in, and then share.
fine, yeah, no worries.
So if you're logged in, that'd be great.
Yeah. So yeah, there's another poll at the end of this session as well, which again is just a few questions. So we've got two responses in so far. I'll just go to share my screen. There we go. Can you all see see those bar charts? Can you see my?
Yeah, I can see them. Can you make them bigger? Is it possible to make it bigger?
Can you see them? Yeah, see them coming through.
Yeah.
Give it another moment for you guys to fill them in. I think you might have all filled them in. Everyone filled them in. Just raise your hand. Just thumbs up if you filled them in. Filled it in. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so let's just have a quick look at this just to see what we've got. Okay, so our organisation is delivering social impact. Well, everyone agrees, or definitely agrees, that that's happening. That's a good sign. That's a nice start. Secondly, our organisation is delivering social impact in the following areas. So changing and sustaining food practice, yeah. Okay, so perhaps everyone feels that knowledge, skills, training and experience is this impact, social impact happening in that respect. Physical and mental health and well-being, community engagement, yeah. Community economic impact, only one response. But by and large, that's kind of quite strong across the board, particularly in those three areas there. Does any of that surprise you? Do you find that? Yeah, find that quite what you'd expect? Yeah. This is an interesting one then. So you'd like to deliver more social impact in the following outcome areas. So inclusion is ranking quite high. Community economic impact is ranking high. Knowledge, skills, training, experience. Well, that was already quite high, but so you almost want to continue doing that. But what's interesting here is perhaps that one around community economic impact and inclusion, where perhaps at the moment you are perhaps feeling that you're not delivering as much impact in that area as you could or want to be, but actually there's a desire to do that. And that kind of speaks to, if we go back to the top of the session, we're talking about, I think it was Heather mentioned the accessing the communities in Herefordshire way, is that right? Is it Hereford she said, Heather? Yeah, it's Hereford, wasn't it? Yeah. And also the example in Edinburgh as well. So I can see how trying to sort of engage more with this idea of inclusion and you know, perhaps accessing people that aren't traditionally the type of people that engage in CSAs, that kind of area is of interest. So that's interesting to see. And the extent to which you're monitoring and measuring social impact, doing some, but not much, is the main winner. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's fine. So this is just really useful material, certainly for us to reflect on it and to think about how we might, you know, progress. Once we come away from this session, it's very useful for us to look at this and think about how we might continue to work with the CSA network, for example. Is there anything that, does anybody want to comment on any of the data that's come through there? I mean, I've kind of just ran through it very briefly, but I don't know if there's anybody else in the room that has anything that's of interest that stands out to them. No? Okay, well, I'll stop sharing and we'll revisit that. And there's another poll at the end of this session, which is kind of similar stuff really to this, which we will also do the similar kind of exercise. Okay, yeah, Claire, if you're able to share your slides again, please, because see you later, Holly. Thanks for joining. We'll send the slides around and there'll be a recording of this as well, which you can engage with. Yeah, Claire, if you can just share your screen again, that'd be really handy because I've got a feeling mine will just crash again. Yeah. Okay.
Is that all right? Can you see that?
That's fine. Yeah, yeah. Claire, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to the point made about the data, that poll, the poll questions. Is anything that stood out for you?
No, not really. I guess, I mean, it's a very small sample, so I'm sort of mindful of not drawing too many conclusions, but I think it is quite interesting that that this particular group is more focused on that community engagement, inclusion area, rather than changing people's eating habits, so diet and stuff. So it is quite interesting because there tends to be, certainly with other groups that we've had, there tends to be a focus on impacts on diet and shopping and those sorts of things. So more about the people eating, shopping and eating practices. And actually, you know, sometimes we find that actually inclusion and community engagement is lower, partly because people think, certainly in terms of community engagement, there is a sense that a lot of people are already doing something on that, but quite often that isn't necessarily, the inclusion bit isn't necessarily part of that. So yeah, I think that was interesting that this group of CSAs is particularly focused on that.
Yeah, I think as well, it's I think that's the kind of direction that we're interested in moving as well, as sort of drivers of this work, is we're interested in that aspect too. If I was to complete this,
yeah,
looking
absolutely
at that quadrant on the module or on the diagram, that point around sort of how we engage with people that perhaps traditionally don't engage with CSAs, what mechanisms are there and what models are there that we can use to help do that. So yeah, I think that this is also speaking to the kind of direction of travel that I think we're interested in as well. I put the answers in a PDF document in the chat box for you to have a look at if and when you want to, and I'll circulate them at the end as well anyway. Yeah, if we want to move on to the next slide. So yeah, we've mentioned the toolkit. We've asked you a few questions about the toolkit, and I know it's a kind of a whistle-stop tour, and you know, look, ideally we'd have a day together in real life, in person. We would sit down and be able to drill down into a lot of this, but yeah, so in terms of where the toolkit's being applied and how we're using it, the main kind of thrust of the toolkit work is within the Loans for Enlightened Agriculture program, which some of you may have heard of or may be aware of. And I mean, there's a hyperlink in the slides, which I'll share them at the end. But yeah, if you just put into your search engine Loans for Enlightened Agriculture program, you'll get to the website, which will tell you a bit more about it. But program is essentially, community food initiatives like CSAs, for example, would apply for some grant funding or for a loan to help with whatever it is. It might be for some infrastructure. It might be to roll a program out on a farm, whatever. It might be, that there'll be something that they want to do with that loan, but contingent upon the loan being drawn down, that farm or that community food initiative would have to sort of show evidence of social impact. So it's kind of contingent upon using our toolkit essentially. So what we do is we work with organizations. I think there's 9 or 10 at the moment that we're working with, who are each on a slightly different journey. So it's over a 3-year period for each organization that applies for this loan. And we would sort of sit down and we'll plan what we want to do for the year in terms of its social impact, collect the data, analyze the data and report on it. And that's really where it's being used in that LEAP project. That's the main thrust of it. But we're also applying it in something called the Coach Project, which is, it's not a project about coaches. It's a project about collaborative agri-food chains. So the acronym COACH is Collaborative Agri-Food Chains, and that's an EU-funded project that CORE are leading on. It speaks to, again, have a look on the website. It's kind of about small-scale agroecological food producers and trying to think about how we scale out and scale up those kind of supply chains across Europe. So there's partners in Romania, Spain, Belgium, UK. It's quite an international project, and we're using the toolkit in a kind of adapted way in that project. The Ready Healthy Eat project as well, I mentioned, which is that's kind of like a sister project to LEAP, which is again it's a collaboration between the Real Farming Trust and CORE. And that is, I mentioned Cyrenians in Edinburgh, they're one of the partners there. So that involves kind of figuring out what impact various kind of supply chains are having, and those supply chains might be through intercepted surplus food, and it might be through innovative kind of models of sourcing locally produced food and then providing that and supplying that to people who need it, which has been particularly, during the pandemic, that's been really vital for a lot of people, is to have those kind of access to that kind of food. So we're doing some monitoring and impact assessment in that project. And then also in Coventry, there's a social supermarket, which is, I won't go into it, but it's a social supermarket. It's been set up in a suburb in Coventry, quite a deprived suburb in Coventry. And we're trying to help assess what impact that social supermarket is having on the people that use it. And it's kind of going beyond the food bank model, but it's still, there's still room for more innovation there for us to think about how we plug in, for example, local CSAs in the Coventry and Warwickshire area to help sort of supply fresh produce to that arena. And that has happened. It's been very piecemeal. But anyway, so that's where we're using it. And that's part of the Feeding Britain sort of agenda as well, which some of you may be aware of. Yeah, okay, if we go to the next slide. So again, if you go onto the social impact toolkit.co.uk, you will see in the toolkit explained in the top right hand corner, you'll see there's a little button that you can click on that says Toolkit Explained, and you'll find this pop up. And this is our life cycle. So this is, I mentioned in the LEAP project that we're using this toolkit, and what we do in order to operationalize it and think about what bits of the toolkit we want to use and how we want to use it, we go through this life cycle on a kind of almost like an annual basis, really, although it is a bit more iterative than that. So what we do here is just to sort of give you a very brief tour of it. We'd start by thinking about what's the aim, what are you trying to do, and so imagine that we're sitting down talking to you guys. We'd say, look, what are we trying to do, what we're trying to achieve here, and it would be a case of figuring out what you do, who you're trying to influence, and what your objective is. We then look at need and think about, okay, that's the aim, that's the goal. What need is this helping to fulfill in terms of social impact? It might be that, if you've got a particular cohort of people that you're trying to access, maybe let's say, you're trying to access the elderly who might be you know, more suffering from loneliness, especially in times of a pandemic. There might be shielding. That would help you to understand, okay, well, in our community, we know that there's a lot of people that are shielding. We know there's a lot of people that are in need of food. And then you start to understand, are our aims helping to achieve that, for example, yeah? The third part, which is kind of linked to the second really very closely, is about mapping this. So we'd sit down and we'd talk about, okay, who are we talking about here? Who is it that your aims are helping to sort of influence or to, you know, to who are they aimed for? Who are they aimed at? And it'd be a case of mapping out those different types of people or communities or different types of stakeholders within your community. So that could be, as I mentioned, it might be families, it might be wealthy people, it might be those that are struggling with food poverty or food insecurity. Other affected people that you work with might be volunteers. It might be that you want to do a bit of a volunteer recruitment drive, or to, you know, or to try and map where are our volunteers based, how far away are they? It might be that you want to think about sort of partner organizations, a whole host of things that you can map and plot. Fourthly, then, what we do is, once we've figured out that kind of background stuff, is we go, okay, what's the indicators and what's the tools that we could use within our toolkit to help us to achieve what we've just talked about? What's going to help us to say, okay, we've got this cohort of people, they're based here, they've got these needs. What indicators do we want to use to help know that we're making a difference there? Yeah, we figure that out, and then we think about, well, how are we going to collect data here then? Who's going to do that? When are you going to do that? And then the next bit, number 6, is how we're going to make sense and analyze that material, and how are we going to you know, how we're going to sort of communicate that in a way that's easy to digest. And then finally, we kind of reflect on the process and refine or change tack if what we collected didn't quite, you know, didn't help us to understand what we wanted to understand, or maybe it really did help us, but now we need to look at another cohort, or maybe there's something that's happened that's, you know, in the last 6-12 months that we need to react to, like a pandemic, which means that you would then do that process again. That's kind of how it works. If we go to the next slide, I think it'll make a bit more sense as well. Just if you just yeah, that's it. So if you thinking about the LEAP project, when we sit down on kind of a one-to-one basis with you know, with community food organizations, this is the kind of process that we would go through. This is like the method, if you like, for the whole thing, the whole strategy. So firstly, we'd have a social impact planning session where we would, you know, can take 2 or 3 hours really of intense discussion about, you know, what's the aim, who we're trying to influence, what tools do we want to use, do we even know what the toolkit is, and have a bit of time just capacity building around that. And then the second bit after that is to sort of agree what we're going to do for the coming 6 to 12 months. And then from there, we've got a series of tools and you know, things that we would implement, which we'd agree and we would refine, because it might be that one of the tools we've got, if you click on the tools in the toolkit, they're quite generic, and it might be that the language needs to be tweaked a little bit. So it might be that rather than use the language of community food business, we just use the word CSA. If we, you know, do you know what I mean? It's that kind of refining that we do. It's got to speak. It's got to make sense. You know, it's not a one size fits all, I think. Yeah, there's not a number 4. Where's number 4 on here? Oh dear, that's poor form. But number 4 is deciding. I guess it's kind of number 3 really as well. It's kind of thinking about the indicators and the tools. But then the 5th, we'd collect data, and that might be through disseminating a survey. It might be through holding a focus group. It might be through an open day that you're holding, and we sort of hold a session there, or you'd hold a session there and you'd ask a few questions linked to the toolkit. That's the data collection phase. Number 6 would be analysing and making sense of that material. And this is normally where the collaboration between some researchers and you guys is most fruitful, because it helps to provide rigor and capacity for the whole thing. Because it's, you know, if we've got sort of focus group material or lots of survey responses, having that sort of researcher input there is really quite valuable. And then 7th, we'd kind of communicate and share those findings, and then put it into a report, which might only be a very brief sort of 1 or 2 pager report about what we've achieved. And then, as I said, in the cycle, this isn't linear, and it is linear to a degree, but we go back to the start again, and we'd start thinking, okay, we've done this, what went well, we'd critically reflect, and we'd go through the process again. So you can see this, that you can almost do this to the nth degree. You could do this forever. You know, this is something you can just keep doing. But there would also be a moment where you perhaps want to, you know, you want to maybe plug into other networks and find out what they're collecting and what data they've got, and then start to think about, well, can we just jump straight to number 7 and actually say, well, we've got loads of data, let's communicate and share our findings with other networks. Yeah, do you see what I mean? So you might jump into a different phase on this life cycle depending on how long you've been doing it. This bit at the bottom here is yeah, this is just saying that when in the LEAP project particularly, we have sort of regular check-ins with our community food businesses. So that's where we would just sort of say, look, are we able to collect the data? You know, are you collecting data? Whereabouts are we at with that? And it might be that, you know, a planned focus group has been cancelled, for example, so we need to replan it and then do it again. Yeah. So that's just a bit of a schematic to help show how it, yeah, kind of how it looks over the course of a year. Yeah, maybe I'm just going to pause for a second. Is there any questions on that? Does it make sense that like that? Does that process seem quite straightforward?
Can I just ask? Can you hear me?
I can. Who's talking?
Yes, it's Heather. Heather. I'm interested in baselines, and this is kind of going through one year, but in order to really measure impact, we need a comparison, don't we? We need a baseline. So do you suggest doing this 1 year and then following on the next year with a similar thing, or at what point are you? How much do you work with the same people and then move to new people, different people, and enlarge the range of the community that you're assessing? Yeah,
that's a good question. It does depend. I think it depends on who that is that you're working with, and also just practically and pragmatically, it might not be possible to work with the same people a year or two later just because they might not be there, which makes it tricky. But the way that we've done it is we've kind of had, let's say we started on year 1 with kind of survey material from consumers or customers, and what we would then do at a later point is those same people we have brought back into like a focus group, and we've elaborated and touched base with those same people. So there is an element of working with the same people and tracking their individual changes, which might occur over the course of 6 months to a year, say. But yeah, but it depends, because you might then also look at this and go, well, year 2, we're really keen to sort of not so much work with our customers, but actually want to use our resource and our time to know more about what our volunteers are doing and what impact we're having on them. So yeah, it's kind of, it depends on the capacity, and it depends on your goals or your aims. It might be that you want to focus on a longitudinal study with people and just focus on one group of customers or consumers, and that's where you target your energies. And it might be that other people want to cast the net wider and just figure out what impact they're having over the course of 3 or 4 years, but with different types of people. So it's kind of depends, I'd say, is the main response to that. But certainly with the work that we've done, it has been useful to get people back into the room who have filled in a survey. And so, for example, at the bottom of a survey, something really simple. You just say, would you be willing to be contacted for follow-up work on this? And you can either run the same survey with them, or you can perhaps do something a bit more depth, you know, in more depth with them, like a focus group. And that's been really useful to have that kind of longitudinal voice. And certainly when it comes to people like maybe trainees or people that are learning to be growers, for example, having a sort of an entry survey where you would ask them what their skill set is at the beginning of their journey or the start of their course and what they hope to learn, and then asking the same questions about what they've achieved at the end of a training program, which might last from 3 months, it might be a year. That's a good way of tracking like a distance traveled, the distance that they travel, not physically distance, but the distance in terms of their learning. So that's also another useful sort of baseline sort of entry exit kind of tool, which is part of this. And so, for example, if you are thinking of having any trainees on your site or on your as part of your program, getting a sense of what their entry level capacity is, or their entry level skill set is, and then doing that at the end, and maybe also in the interim, can help track the change that you're making to that individual. And then you can start to build a case that, well, actually, we've had a big impact on this person because they've learned how to grow. They might have set up their own CSA, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, does that help answer your question a bit? Yeah. Okay.
Can I just add there that one of the other things that we are trying to do with this work, really, with organisations that we've worked with for a time, is that rather than, for instance, doing a survey sort of on a yearly basis, we're looking very much in the way that at every moment where we're collecting some data, we're trying to collect data which is going to amplify or give more depth to the data that you created previously. So rather than, you know, going through the same material and re-evaluating that same material. So for instance, having a customer survey, we might not necessarily do a customer survey the second year. We might do something a bit more in depth, looking at one particular aspect of something that came out of that survey the previous year or something like that. So the idea is that rather than having a saying this is our social impact, this is what we've achieved, that you're building a sort of a set of data that is constantly being added to, so and giving you more colour and more depth and more understanding of what is going on. So that's the idea of it. And so you might not go back to resurveying those people for 5 years, because actually what you're trying to do is add depth in the meantime. So yeah, I think the baselining absolutely is important. So quite often in the first year you are doing, or you tend to be doing, more of the surveying work to create that baseline. But as time moves on, the survey stuff either becomes much more focused, so they're much smaller and they might focus on a particular aspect with a particular group, or you might be much more looking at qualitative items that will add to the quantitative data that you've collected through the survey. So it's all constantly building is what we're trying to get to, that you're constantly building it rather than just, you know, just reflecting a moment in time.
Yeah. And I mean, we although we've been building the toolkit for a while, like where we're using it is still, we're still quite young as well in it, in the process, I think, as well. Yeah, if we've been doing this for 10 years, I think we'd probably have a different answer to your question. You know, maybe we'd say, well, you know, you can do it this way, you can do some longitudinal stuff. But yeah, I think because we've only been doing the LEAP project for a year or two, with the pandemic on as well, it's I think we're also still learning as well a bit about what the most effective use of our resources is. But I think it always comes back to it depends, and we have to be, the way that we've tried to do this and the way that we try to work and would work with you guys as well is to be responsive, responding to what your needs are and what you're interested in with it, rather than say, here's, do this, go and do this bit, now do that. We've kind of looked to almost facilitate the process rather than lead it, and be led more by what you're interested in. Because that's where we're at with this. It's not, as I say, we're interested in building that evidence base at the, you know, the community food business level, really, to begin with, and then going from there. So Yeah, hopefully that answers your question and adds a bit of flavour to what we were just saying. Yeah, okay. Should we move on to the next slide? We've got about 45 minutes remaining as well. Yeah, and so in terms of thinking about the end of, like, let's say the end of a 9 to 12 month period, we've collected data. So what? So what are we going to do with that then? We might. Well, it depends. Again, it depends on who we're trying to influence, what we want to say, how we want to say it, where we want to say it. And so here's an example of a kind of a social impact card or graphic, which is quite an effective, relatively quick way of communicating something. A quick way of communicating something to your stakeholders, or to your staff, or to your local council. You know, it depends on what you want to use it for. So in this instance, this particular card, it just captures some of the headlines that we've found through the work that we've done with, in this case, Apricot Centre, which some of you may know of. They are based in Cookson Cross near Totnes, and they're a community food business basically. So yeah, this shows what social impact is being delivered. And so the other point there, that this point around the process of doing social impact brings people together. So in some of the surveys that we've run, and some of the focus groups we did, which in this case we did with trainees, for example, that process of bringing people together to talk about their learning and what impact being part of Apricot Centre has had was almost like a shot in the arm for that business itself. It gave people a chance to connect and come together, reflect and talk, and so just actually talking about this got people energized and enthused about what they were doing and what they were doing it for. And I think that's a really important point here, is that irrespective of what data you might get, the process of bringing people together to talk about this and to ask them questions linked to what they're learning, or why they're doing it, or what they hope to achieve once they've learned their training or whatever, the process of doing that was really valuable. And that's, I think, if you're perhaps new to the game, or you've got a CSA which you're trying to establish and grow, that could be a really valuable sort of almost like a team building type exercise, where you bring people together to just talk about these issues. So yeah, that's an example of a kind of an output that we would create for someone who's involved in the LEAP project. Yeah, want to go to the next one? Yeah, so here is an example from Locavore, which is based in Glasgow, and we worked with Locavore last year, really, throughout the pandemic as well, with a guy called Rob Wannerton, who's sort of their social impact person there. And yeah, so what we did with them was, again, we ran a survey with, I think there was 212 people responding to this survey, and we asked them questions which again are in the toolkit. You can click on them and see what those questions are. And here's some of the highlights which came from that. And this forms part of a bigger kind of impact portfolio that Locavore do. So Locavore have got capacity to sort of spend a bit more time and energy on this than a lot of organisations, and they produced like an LM3 tool as well, an LM3 report, which kind of looks at this idea of community, the economic impacts of Locavore. So this is part of a bigger impact piece of work, but you can see the type of output that they've created is quite powerful and quite succinct and quite adaptable. You can send it out via email. You might want to use it on social media. You can put it in a newsletter. You can talk about it at a conference. You can use it in a webinar like this. So you can see how the different kind of outputs are quite helpful. You might also do something that you might produce a short film about it and talk about it in a short film kind of way. Maybe even have a podcast on it. And the 5 Acre CSA, which is the CSA I'm a member of in just outside Coventry, we did a podcast for about 40 minutes, 30 minutes about the Social Impact Toolkit, and that podcast is available on their website. And you know, you can track how many people have listened to that and how many people have logged on and downloaded that, which might be something that you can use as a metric to evidence your community engagement, for example. So you can see how there's different ways of communicating the kind of impact work that you do. Yeah, next slide. Yeah, so yeah, this is kind of just almost going back to what we said at the beginning of the session about why should you use this? Why should CSAs use our toolkit? What's the value of it? Firstly, it's, you know, you can understand the motivations and drivers for engagement. Yeah, what's your existing customers' needs? What are they getting out of this? But also, you might want to gain new customers. Secondly, increase community engagement and sort of solidarity, and that speaks to this sort of right-hand side of the toolkit around community. Thirdly, understanding the social impact is about, yeah, it's kind of building this idea of transparency, and I think that's really important for us as a sector. We've been talking about community food initiatives and community food businesses. This idea of transparency and how they're governed and how things are communicated is quite important. So doing this social impact work helps you do that. And yeah, fourth point there about, you know, organizations like CSAs are, you know, they are judged by, yeah, what kind of claims they make, and likewise as a researcher, you know, we're sort of judged on what arguments we build and what arguments we make, and we need evidence to build those arguments. We can't just say, oh, you know, CSAs help mitigate the climate crisis. Although we know that, we need to have evidence that makes that case. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this again, I just very quickly really just went onto the CSA network website and found the CSA charter, and I just did a very quick kind of thinking about, okay, how might the toolkit apply to a CSA, to the CSA network, thinking about these different principles embedded within the charter. And so there's principles around people care, earth care, and fair share, which, I mean, you guys already know all this anyway, but I was looking at this and thinking, okay, how might it apply? And so I think that you could argue that some of our indicators within the toolkit speak very closely to some of these principles or some of these practices that are embedded within the CSA charter, which as CSA members you would sort of inherently be aligned with. And so thinking about people care, there's perhaps indicators around affordability, diet, employment, earth care, learning, knowledge and exchange. That talks a little bit about, yeah, how people are learning about what's the CSA does, why does that matter, and sort of gaining more learning and knowledge about that. And on the final bit there, the fair share, and we've got an indicator on relationship with others and place. So, you know, that talks about, are people learning more about issues around provenance, about the true cost of food? Are they getting more connected to the place they're from, or where a CSA is, and also to people around them? And that's where those indicators of partnerships, networking and embeddedness and relationship with others and place come into play, and they're from the community outcome quadrant. So you can see that's a very crude and very quick cross-check that I did ahead of this webinar, which shows that how you could very quickly look at perhaps your aims or your core principles and almost cherry pick some of the indicators in our toolkit to say, well, okay, I can see how our aim, which is about trying to improve people's understanding of ecological farming methods, let's use this indicator so we can see if that's actually happening. That's how that would materialize. Okay, before we move on, is everything kind of clear? I'm conscious that I'm going through this quite quickly, and yeah, quite sort of surface level stuff. So are we all okay? Yeah. Are you finding this useful? You know, no, Luke, no, this is terrible. No, we're all just ready to go. Okay, let's go to the next slide then, please, Claire. Yeah, so the next thing we had was a breakout session, but I don't think there's really any need for us to have one, because there's only sort of 4 or 5 of us in the room. So it might be better to just use this next, almost like the remainder of the session, really, the next sort of 20 minutes or so, to just continue talking about the toolkit and to think about how it applies to kind of your world. So yeah, Claire, are you happy to just do that as a one group?
Yeah, sure, Luke. Shall I click on the social impact? Shall I get the actual model up? Would that be useful?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, go on then, do that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. I can see the chat box as well. Someone's put this is useful. That's good. That's good to know. I've also put in the chat. I'm just gonna put it on again. Is a Word document, which, sorry, I can't multitask. Give us a second. Okay, so you should be able to see. Can you see it? I've just uploaded into the chat box a social impact toolkit lifecycle planning template. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen just before we go back into this toolkit, if that's okay, because I just wanted to just briefly talk about this Word document. Let me just
yeah, sure.
Yeah, just a second.
Just do it. Yeah, and then we'll come back to that website in a second. Can you see that table? Yeah, I can see it's quite small, but yeah.
That better? Yeah. So this document, which I've uploaded into the chat box, you can download it. This is you can use this to start building your own social impact plan. And so what we've got on the first page is, if you remember the life cycle, these are the headings for the life cycle. Yeah. Each of those headings, there's a series of questions, which again, if we were doing this as part of the LEAP project, or if we had a load of resources and money sitting there as part of a funded project, we could sit down and say, right, you know what, let's sit down on one-to-one basis and go through these questions in a very sort of sequential way and build a real solid plan. We haven't got that luxury, so we can't quite do that, but what's on here is something that you can take away, and perhaps you might want to workshop this with your colleagues. You might want to take it to a staff meeting. You might want to do it as part of an away day type thing. This is a resource that you can use, and these questions are there to help prompt you to think about each bit of the life cycle. Yeah. Which is here. Now, what's really useful, I think, is in this document is the final page, or the penultimate page, page 3 and 4. This is an example of how it might look. And we can do this as well, actually, over the next sort of 20 minutes or so. We can start to build a very sort of crude plan. So redefining aims. Well, what is that? The red text tells you that that's about the project vision, the aims and ambition, why we're doing what we're doing. So let's say that one of your aims, and this is a fictitious example, one of your aims is to provide healthy food to our community, which that might be a paraphrased aim for some of you. Okay, that's the aim. So what are the key policy levers then, and the key what's kind of the need then? What that's the aim, but what need is that helping us to meet? Well, we can argue that to provide healthy food to our community is helping us to sort of meet health needs. You know, if let's say you've got issues around malnutrition or obesity or people not eating properly, and you can find that there'll be data for your locality, or might be nationally, but there'll be data that you can find to help make that argument, which might be that X amount of people in this region are suffering from diabetes, or X amount of people in this particular ward in my community are suffering from food insecurity, or perhaps at risk of food insecurity. And you can use things like the indicators of multiple deprivation for that. You might use a material that's in the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment to help identify local needs. So that in this sense, the need is that we need to try and improve people's health. So your aim is directly relevant to a need in the area, in the community that you're trying to serve. Okay, so who do we need to talk to then? Who are the people that we need to engage with then? So in this case, this fictitious example, customers, especially those experiencing food poverty. But it might be that actually they're not customers yet because they're not able to access or afford the food that you're providing. So it might be that you'd have to perhaps have a campaign, or perhaps have a funded bit of work which help you to access people that are at risk of food insecurity. And a good example of that is, do any of you know Tamar Grow Local down in the southwest? Have you heard of Tamar Grow Local, the food hub? So they've got a kind of a collaboration or a partnership with Plymouth Council, and what they do is they've had a kind of a cross-subsidised program where veg bags have been subsidised and provided or supplied to people experiencing food insecurity or people at risk of food poverty in deprived parts of Plymouth. And they've worked with sort of the local housing benefits department and people in the council to help broker that partnership. And in doing so, they've had this program called Grow Share Cook, which is kind of a training program that helps people who are in receipt of these vegetable bags to learn how to cook and to learn how to use the ingredients that they're getting. In the end, what that's helping do is helping them to improve their diet. Yeah. Anyway, I'm kind of going off piece a little bit, but this is the who. They're the who. Yeah. The fourth part here is the indicators and tools. So we would have a look at the toolkit, the model, and say, okay, well, what's useful on that toolkit that's going to help us to evidence this outcome and help us to meet our aim. And it might be that changing and sustaining food practice is the outcome, which is within the health domain. There's an indicator around diet. So we would click on that and we would have a look at diet and we'd see what tool we might want to use to actually capture that evidence. And it might be that a survey with these people is the best way to get that. It might be that having a focus group with them in a local community centre or something would be the best way to get that information. That would depend on your context and it would depend on what you feel would work best. And it might be that the tools or the indicators when it comes to kind of the critical reflection didn't work. It might be that we didn't get enough engagement, we didn't get enough responses, we weren't able to access the people we needed to. And that's where you would reflect and then go back to that. But after we've decided on the tools and the indicators that we want to use, we would then look to collect data. So almost figuring out what resources are there to do this, how will we do it, when will we do it? And so in this case, John Smith, with support from another, will build the survey and share it by January with the rest of the team. And so on our toolkit, and I'll go on to that in a minute, on our toolkit, you'll see that there's different questions and different tools that you can use to build, and you can go and do that independently. This table as well, you might flag that actually we need a volunteer to help us to build this survey, or because there's one of the volunteers who's working with us, they know how to do surveys, we'll get them to help us. So you jot that down here. You'd also make a note that actually this has got to be done by a certain time in the year or a certain time in the month based on pinch points or other things you've got coming up. Someone might be going away to a conference, or someone might be busy in the field or whatever. So this kind of helps you think about the when. How do we collect data? Sixthly, analysing and communicating that. So it would be a case of saying, well, okay, how are we going to do that? It might be that the funder that's funding this program wants to know what our impact is. So there we need to sort of communicate that to them. How do they want that? Do they want it in a report? Are they happy to have a one pager on that? Do they need 100 pages? So that would be a way you would document the how you do that. This would also be a moment to perhaps identify that you might want some support with the analysis of that material, and that's where, as mentioned earlier, this researcher collaboration is really fruitful, is because it's a chance for us to help support and build the rigor and the sort of the validity behind data. And so you can see here the fictitious example that John Smith is going to lead on this, and he's going to check with he's going to check to see if there's a researcher or a potential research collaboration that might help them to do that. And then finally, reflecting on the process. So it might be that you've gone ahead and collected some data or tried to collect some data, didn't work very well, or John Smith and unfortunately went, was poorly for 2 or 3 weeks and wasn't able to do the work. So that didn't go particularly well. So this is, we have to reflect on the whole process, and that's really what this would do. So can you see, I mean, that's just a very crude whistle-stop tour about how we kind of build this, but can you see how you would go about doing that? And so what the toolkit does is, I mean, we'll get the toolkit up in a minute, but what this does is it just helps you to almost put a framework and a structure to the whole process. It's not going to give you, this won't give you the answer to say we are providing healthy food to our community. It won't tell you, yes, you are. You still have to do some heavy lifting yourselves. We still have to, as humans, understand the data and make sense of it. But what it will do is it will give you a structure and a process to work through that will help you to engage with that aim and to think about perhaps the extent to which you're delivering healthy food. It will help you to gauge that and to start to think about, okay, well, actually, it turns out we're not delivering food to the people that we really want to deliver it to. How do we go about changing tack then? And this process will help you to do that. I just want to pause for a second. Does that all, what's the feeling there? How does that, having just had that sort of whistle stop tour about that table, does that kind of make sense? Yeah. Good. Okay. Yeah, so in terms of the next step, I mean, we've got 25 minutes. I'm not sure what the best use of our time is going to be, actually. I mean, I guess that's a question for you guys now. Is we pose these questions. I'm just going to put them back into the chat box. So are you currently already measuring impact of some of the domain or outcome areas in the toolkit? If so, which and how? Well, we kind of asked that in the poll already. Which ones would you be most interested in using? That was the second question. What are the key domains, outcomes, indicators, and tools that you could use, and why? So maybe what we could do is we could actually, would you find it useful if we started to build one of these, fill in the table with kind of your relevant to your world, relevant to your own organizations? Would that be useful, or would it be more useful to perhaps explore the toolkit in more detail? I mean, the breakout session was really designed to be a chance for us to do some of that, but also to just check that things are making sense and to sort of maybe go a little bit deeper on some of the tools, or maybe explore some of the indicators in more detail. So I guess, yeah, I'm kind of open to how we want to play the next 20 minutes or so. And what do you think, Claire? What do you think is going to be the best use of our time?
Yeah, and what do you all think, CSAs? Because this is your chance to ask, have a go, get more info from Luke. Silence.
It's just a lot. I think it's just quite a lot to think about, because obviously, like Luke said, it's kind of, we've been going along the surface of it all, and there's various places where you could go a bit deeper into it. I think it's all very helpful, and I'm pretty sure for us it's something we definitely want to look at, and we definitely need to get on to thinking about our social impact indicators for a whole variety of reasons. Yeah, because looking at that table, I can see like the aims and needs. Yeah, we've done that. We've done the column after that. I can't remember what that was. And then the mapping, we've kind of done that. And then the last 3 columns, not.
Yeah, sure.
So it's hard to know, to say like, what's next. Be good to hear from other people.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I would just say is, it's very easy to get very overwhelmed by all of this as well. It's a lot of work. I'm sure you all know this, but I would really encourage you to, while the mapping is really important, and you can map the whole of how you see your social impact. Don't try and do too much in terms of the data collection at one go, because what will happen then is you will be totally overwhelmed with it, and most likely give up on it altogether. You know, just keep in mind that it's absolutely fine that you're only going to focus on one particular thing for this particular year. Focus on that, do it, and don't worry about all the other things that you haven't done. That's why the mapping exercise is so important, because it then allows you to place that data that you have collected within the context of the bigger picture mapping, and enables you to see that that is just, you know, one step. So you've done the first step along the pathway of measuring your social impact. So I think, yeah, just do sort of treat it in that light, and don't look at the whole toolkit and think, oh my gosh, well, yeah, we've got to deliver on all of these different outcomes and we've got to measure everything in all of these outcomes, because it's not actually doable. And we have actually reined back more and more in terms of our expectations about what people might do within the projects that we're working with and who are using the toolkit at the moment. We've had to rein it back and be really mindful of, you know, sort of less is more, really, with this, in terms of we've all got to be realistic about how much time you can spend on it. Even though you do want to do this work, you have to be mindful of it's not possible to do all of it. It would be lovely, but you know, all of you would need a whole team of social impact people on site to be able to do the whole thing all in one go. And the other thing I wanted to just say is that, as Luke said previously, this is very much a work in progress. And one of the things that has become very clear to us over the last few weeks is that it is completely race neutral. Yeah. So we are very aware of that, and it's top of our to-do list to go through all of the outcome areas with a sort of race lens on it, because it's a very obvious and very glaring omission from the toolkit as it is at the moment. So yeah, so we will be adapting it and adding outcome areas and indicators that will try and give more visibility to how race impacts might play out within community food businesses, to help you to be able to see that better within your own context.
Yeah, that's really good point. Yeah, so just that question again, just what do other people think? I mean, you know, Lisa's mentioned, I think what Lisa said was really useful to hear, and I think what Claire said is good about focusing on maybe one or two things. It might be that you just really want to look at, you know, this issue of, it might be just want to look at your volunteers. You know, what impact are we having on our volunteers' well-being? What are they getting from this, for example? Then that's it. That's it for now. Because I think we have to caveat this, that we're coming to it from the point of view that we haven't got a research funded project or a huge amount of resources to go and do this in a way that I think would be ideal. So it's more a case of what can be done, you know, in the meantime, because, you know, we are obviously looking for funding, and I think it'd be great to have a much bigger project and some more resources to do something. But in the meantime, if I think it'd be really useful if you guys could have a go at filling in that table and just zooming in on one or two things that you're really interested in or really want to capture data on. And that kind of keeps things bubbling along, keeps things moving. But yeah, I don't know if anybody else wants to riff off of what anybody else has just what we've just said.
I just want to say thank you very much. This has been useful and encouraging. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I do feel quite overwhelmed by the whole area of social impact, because it's the time involved. You know, it's it feels like I'm so strained by absolutely everything else. And I do, whenever we run lots of projects with lots of families and adults and kids, and we do in some form or other always ask for some feedback and send out various surveys, sometimes several weeks later, but we don't follow them up months or years later, which I know is a problem, but it often comes down to time. And I have a lot of data and I have lots of fantastic quotes from people and emails from people and words, and it's just finding that time to put it all together just doesn't really happen, which I know it's so important and it needs to, and there's so much more we could do going forward. I know there's a huge amount more, but yeah, it's really good to be encouraged to see ideas of what else we can do. On the infographics, any recommendations of, because I've never put one together, and I'm quite good with graphics and generally, but I don't do that. And I keep every year thinking, oh, I must do that and showcase all the stuff that we've done. Are there any ideas of any sites or anywhere, any tools, specific tools to put them together? Because I really particularly liked the last one from, what was it called? The Lockaville.
Yeah. So we have used. You've probably heard of it, Canva. You heard of Canva?
No.
I've just put it in the chat. Well, Canva.com. It's
yeah.
There's different tiers of membership. There's a free one. You can use.
Right. Yeah.
But then you've only got access to a limited amount of images if it's free. But it's still useful. But what we've got in the LEAP project is we've got I think it's like an organizational license or premium license or something, and it gives you access to more images, and you can just be a bit more just make it look a bit more aesthetically pleasing, I think, than if on the free package. But Canva's really good. Basically, it's very, very easy. It's so easy to use as well. What you can do is you can upload your own images, so you can upload your own CSA logo, and that becomes, you can put that on. There's yeah, and that I would really recommend using that. It is quite quick and easy to use. I'm just trying to see if I can show you another one which we did.
Yeah, they have a not-for-profit option. It's a bit it takes a while for them to register it. So yeah, you do have to be sort of on the case, because they sort of leave it till the last minute, and then somehow you end up paying, and anyway, but they do have a not-for-profit option, which is free at the sort of first stage level, which is what we've got now, which does give you quite a lot of functionality. Actually, there is a totally free, I think, but I think the free thing is only a trial, isn't it, Luke? I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually, right. Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, you can, if you are a not-for-profit, then you can apply for a free Canva a free Canva account.
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to have a look at that. That's fantastic. Thanks for that.
I've used Canva. We use Canva, the free version, and it doesn't seem to run out. And yeah, if you use templates, they're a bit annoying sometimes, but you can get some quite good templates, which then you can just put your stuff in instead of what's there, which kind of gives you a pre-designed thing. But we've designed our annual report last year, we did on Canva, and it's relatively simple. So yeah, it's quite good.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to have a look. Never heard of them. Great.
I have to say, we did try and get the not-for-profit free thing, and I just got no response from them. I kind of applied a couple of times through the email or whatever it was, and yeah, just got nothing back. So
yeah, I think it takes a little bit of, you have to just keep on and on at them. It took me a while as well, Susie. I think they're not too keen on registering them, I think, but we did get it in the end.
Yeah. So we found that useful. Yeah, there's maybe if I just, Claire, would you be able to share your screen again with the slides, please? Because there's just a couple more slides to run through, and then I think that's probably a natural moment to leave the slides, and we can continue just chatting. but there's also a nice infographic on the slides as well, which I wanted to just show you. There's also a poll, a second poll that I've put into the chat box, a link to that, which asks you a bit about, again, it's only 4 questions, I think, about what else you need in order to help engage with this. And similar to when we've talked to other people about this before, I think this idea of someone helping to lead on it and resource it, because you guys have already got 1,000,001 things to do, and then it's finding the time and the capacity. And although it's quite interesting that we designed this thinking, oh great, we'll design this in a standalone way so that people can take it and run with it, but it doesn't solve the problem that you've only got 24 hours in a day. Ideally what we need is to make more hours, but not quite how we do that. So yeah, this is in terms of what we're doing next. I'd like to see this as start of conversations. I don't want this to be like an in and out. You know, I'd like to continue conversations with the CSA network. You know, I'd like to keep conversations with you guys as well. So I think that this is starting that, and I hope that you do want to continue those conversations and those connections. So yeah, just to sort of try and close really is the first point here is how you communicate and what you communicate depends on what story you're trying to tell, because it is a story. I know it's evidence, but it's also a story, and what influence you want to make. That's an important point. We're planning on speaking at the ORFC in 2022 in January about this work, and I'm sure some of you will be there for that. So that's where as well we will kind of share what we're doing with wider people, and you know, it's a chance to get feedback, engage more people in more networks, and yeah, we're also using it in the LEAP and the Ready Healthy Eat projects, and again we're always thinking as well when we're building these sort of outputs that we want to try and think about how do we use this to resource a future project that gives us a bit more cash injection, a bit more resource to be able to work with you basically. Yeah, next slide please, Claire. There's only a couple left. So again, these are the ones I wanted to show you. So the one on the left is a kind of a year one's worth of LEAP project stuff, highlights, and again that's built on Canva, and yeah, it's got some quite some powerful data there. We've used the toolkit to come to those to get to those data sets. And the Ready Healthy Eat one as well on the right, again, kind of like a sister project. Yeah, these are just example outputs that you can produce, you know. Yeah, I mean the other thing as well is we're not there yet because we haven't been doing it long enough, but eventually I think we'll get into a point where we've got a critical mass of data from these projects, and also connected projects like the one I mentioned in Coventry in the social supermarket. And there's an opportunity there to sort of feed into a policy brief, a bit like what the Landworks Alliance are very good at this. They sort of produced policy briefs or recommendations or briefing papers. And we need to also be doing that and thinking about, okay, what does all this data mean at that level? You know, not just for you as an individual organisation, but what is it? What kind of what claims are we trying to make to change things? What can we change through this? Yeah, next slide. We wrap up there now, I think. Yeah, there's some pointers about what we still need to do. Obviously need some cash injection. We talked about integration with environmental impacts earlier. I think that was something that was mentioned at the top of this session. Toolkit MOT, yeah, where's the race, diversity, culture? The dashboard functionality is something which I keep falling back to, and something I really like to, again, have some resources to do, which would be a case of building this tool and giving you guys like a login where you would be able to get into this toolkit space, have your own dashboard, and you'd almost be able to drag and drop bits of the toolkit onto your own dashboard. And by doing so, you are then building your own plate from a menu. So let's say that your plate is an hour a week big, or 2 hours a week big, or 3 hours a week big. And what you can do is drag and drop the relevant indicators onto your plate, and then the dashboard almost serves as a prompt to tell you to keep abreast of it. That I think is going to be really useful. doing something like that, maybe integrated with some kind of app interface, maybe. But that puts people off as well, as you know, not everyone's, you know, on board with that sort of work. Anyway, so there's way, you know, there's these things we've been thinking about for a while. It's just having the resources and the time to do it, really. But that's very much on the agenda. And then there's some research questions at the bottom there as well about, you know, these are enduring questions. And that, I think one of them as well is the second question there is really, really key. And it's something that I think about a lot and I still can't quite figure out the answer to, which is how do you engage with people who aren't engaged? Because a lot of the data that we get is from people that are engaged. I know that sounds so stupid to say, but, you know, we're being told how great things are from people that really enjoy it and can afford to engage with you guys, which isn't a bad thing. That's still useful. But what about those that are below the surface that just aren't being captured, that we haven't interviewed, we haven't engaged with, we haven't connected with? That's something which bothers me, is that we don't have that. We don't have the methodological toolkit really to do that, and that's something we need to keep thinking about. So yeah, that's just sort of, yeah, the final questions there. If we just go on to the final slide, I think that might be it actually, Claire. Yeah, so this is going back to the learning objectives and learning outcomes. I'm hoping that the first four, we've kind of explained a bit about why we've done it, how we've done it, how it works, how it might look in practice. We've had a chance to talk about it with us, I'm hoping. Fit 5 and 6 are perhaps a little bit more speculative, you know. Hopefully you can see how it's starting to apply to your world, and I think that from what you've said, it does. And then number 6, do you feel enthused to collaborate? And that might be, again, it might be that we can't necessarily do what we want to do right now, but if there's an appetite to sort of go deep with this, then I think that that means that these last 2 hours have been time well spent, you know. So I mean, do you feel that, yeah, points 5 and 6, do you feel kind of if you give us a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, thumbs down? Yeah, good. I see Lisa's got a thumbs up. That's good. Yeah.
Luke, have you got the poll?
Nice one. Yeah, I have actually. Yeah, I've hopefully you've filled that in. Yeah, we've only got a few more minutes really. Let's have a look.
Do you want to just put the poll up on the screen?
I do. Yeah, let's do that. Is that it? That should be the poll. There's only 3 responses. So yeah, some of you probably haven't filled it in just yet. Yeah, but up for 3 responses. It's all anonymous as well. I don't know who's filled this in. Useful. I can definitely see how it would apply. That's good. That's reassuring. Would you be interested in supporting the toolkit if you could? Yeah. So that's good as well. No one's put no anyway on the second question. That's good. How confident you are using this toolkit? Yeah, not particularly confident. Fairly confident. Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I mean, we probably haven't had long enough to really drill down, you know, and to go into the detail. But I agree that that's okay. Number 4, what are the key factors that would encourage you to use the toolkit? So a bit of training, financial resource, yeah, human resource, yeah, making it smartphone friendly, yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah, I think that they're very, yeah, I'm just refreshing it to see if there's any other responses come in. Yeah, if you can fill it in, even if you, oh, there's another response come in. Yeah, again, if you've not had a chance to fill it in, that's fine. So yeah, more kind of, I guess if we had like some research, if I was coming to you now and saying, oh, we've got a bit of cash, a bit of resource to lead on this, are you willing to get involved? What I'm seeing here is generally there'd be an appetite to do that. It's much harder for us to say off you go, because you probably need a bit more guidance on it, and also, you know, you haven't got the time to dedicate to to necessarily engaging with this to the level that perhaps is needed, or perhaps that we would like. So what I'm hearing here and from what I'm seeing is, yeah, it's resourcing it. It's getting resources behind it, and those resources would involve a bit more training, more guidance, and then that life cycle. If we could almost resource it to go through that life cycle in a bit more detail together, I think that would help. So yeah, even though we designed this as to try and be more independent and standalone, it's that issue. We keep going back to that issue of capacity. So that's useful. That's useful for us to hear. So thank you for filling in the poll. Okay, I'll export this material so you can have a copy of it. I'll just put it in the chat box now. I think that's it in terms of slides and things we wanted to say. Yeah, it is. So in terms of where we leave it, I'd encourage you to have a look, try and build that table. You know, if you've got that table, you've got that life cycle, have a look at it. And if you can, you know, if you can start to populate that and fill it in and start to engage with it, that'd be really useful. But I appreciate that that's not something you necessarily can do if you don't have the time or the capacity. But it's more a case of watch this space, and I'd be keen to sort of re-engage with you and plug in with you guys, pending more resources for this project, and also to work with Susie in the CSA network at perhaps a sort of network level as well. If we can secure something to do that, I think would be really useful. So we'll have discussions about that as well, and we'll just keep you in the know. So yeah, is there any final points or questions that anybody wants to add? No? Okay, anything else, Claire or Susie, maybe, if there's anything you want to add?
Just to say thank you to both of you, and to the CSAs, just, you know, keep in touch with us if you do start using the toolkit, because we'd really like to kind of, yeah, talk about people using it and how you're finding it. And, you know, if a few CSAs are doing it, it might be useful to kind of come together and chat about it. I know obviously Edinburgh and or you're both on the incubator Growing Local in Edinburgh, so you can have that kind of ongoing discussion. But yeah, I mean, I think if we're hoping to redo the bit of research that was done in 2011 about the impact of CSA, potentially using the social impact toolkit and using our annual survey, which will take place in sort of January, February next year, as the sort of vehicle to ask the questions. So yeah, hopefully we'll have some data on UK CSA as a whole in terms of social impact, which would be exciting.
Yeah, it would. Yeah. So yeah, this is all networking. It's all sort of, yeah, we're sharing ideas, and I like to think of this as, you know, it's the start of collaborations. You know, it's got to start somewhere. So I'm hoping, as I say, that point about do you feel enthused to collaborate? I do. I feel like it'd be great to do more with the CSA universe with this. That's really where I'm at, and if you're on the same page, then that's really where I want to be. And yeah. But thanks for your time. You know, I know you're busy people, and the last 2 hours, I'm hoping that you rewind to where we were 2 hours ago, you've got a bit more understanding. You might have more questions and more anxieties about it, but hopefully you have more understanding. So thanks very much. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Great to meet you. Bye.
Bye.